Sometimes you gotta be careful what you wish for when you ask for a Bible verse. We'll get into a story based on that in just a bit, but first, Story 1. Don't want to answer our request for a walkthrough and key exchange? Then we will leave without letting you know. Finding affordable housing where I live is nearly impossible, so when my roommate and I finally managed to secure an apartment through an acquaintance, we were thrilled. It felt like a huge relief, even though the rent was higher than what we could comfortably afford. Because the rent included utilities and internet, we convinced ourselves it was worth it and decided to overlook a few glaring red flags. It did not take long before the problems started. The first time was when our electricity was cut off, not because of us, but because our landlord had not paid the bill. We spent 5 days without power, which also meant we lost everything in the fridge. Legally, this meant we were not required to pay rent for those days, but when we pointed this out, our landlord flat out refused to reimburse us. Taking him to court would have cost more time and money than simply letting it go. Then it happened again. The heating was cut in November. After that, the internet began getting cut every other month. Eventually, we just started paying the internet provider directly just to ensure we had a stable connection. Through all of this, we never once failed to pay our rent on time. The problem was our landlord. He simply was not passing it on. The final straw came when the police showed up at our apartment with a search warrant in his name. They searched the entire place, even barging in on me while I was in the shower. That was the moment we knew we had to leave. In truth, we had decided long before to move out, but finding a new place in this market was incredibly difficult. We did give him notice. We sent a text with our departure date, requested a walkthrough, and asked about exchanging the keys and deposit. We also mailed a formal letter to his legally registered address. Yes, this is an actual thing in Germany. Though, of course, his registered address was our apartment. In the letter, we included documentation of the utility cuts and the police search as grounds for breaking the contract. He never responded. Not to our text, not to our mail, no call, nothing. He ghosted us. We already knew that we would never see our deposit. He's clearly not great with money, so we left. No rotting food in the fridge and no shrimp in a lamp, but we didn't bother to clean up either. But here's where the petty revenge kicks in. After months of being ignored, after being left without heat, power, and internet, and after the drama of the police walking through our place, we walked away. And now he's the one desperately texting us daily, begging to know if we're still going to pay rent, pleading for us to respond, and asking if we could scan his important mail that's still arriving at our old address. If ghosting is his game, we're more than happy to play. Alright, now let's check out some replies here. Underground Avenue said, "Small claims court are cheap to file a suit and do not require a lawyer. Even if you don't file a suit, the rent deductions for missing heat and electricity are easy to research and require nothing more than a formal letter to the landlord." And OP replied to this, "Certainly, but he just repeatedly ignores our messages, and had the audacity to blame us for the police search. This guy has personality flaw that he accepts absolutely no responsibility for any of his actions, and that we're forced to be dealing with." The phone company assigned Nintendo game support number as my home number. Many years ago, I moved into a house in Redmond, Washington, home to Microsoft, and soon I discovered Nintendo of America. Both companies had offices a few blocks from my house. A few months before I moved in, Nintendo canceled their local number for game support hotline to an 800 number and gave up on the local number. This meant anyone across the US or Canada calling that number would not reach Nintendo. The phone company assigned the old number as my residential phone number. As soon as the phone was plugged in, it started ringing off the hook with people calling to get support for a game at all hours of the day. I called the phone company, and initially, they refused to change the number. They told me the company policy was to charge a hefty fee to switch the number, and there was no guarantee it would not be an old business number. I just moved in, so I didn't have the cash. Instead of dealing with the endless calls, I decided to pick up the phone and get my petty revenge. First, I would demand a credit card from any caller. I told them to go into mommy's purse and pull one out. Then I would have them read the number and name off the card. I never wrote the information down. I just wanted to see what would happen if I asked for it. Sometimes the parents would pick up the phone and start screaming at me, so I started screaming back. I would thank them for the new TV, complain that the card was over the limit, and do anything I felt would entertain me. I said some things that were inappropriate 30 years ago, and they're even less appropriate today. I'm not proud of it, but I was young, frustrated, and thought if I was annoying enough, they would switch the number. Sure enough, one day I picked up the phone and it was the local phone company telling me good news. We will be updating your number at no cost. I guess more than a few parents called Nintendo demanding I be fired for my behavior on the phone, and that's when they realized I didn't work there, and the mistake of letting the old phone number go. The new number had never been used previously, so no more than 2 a.m. calls, except from drunk dialing friends. Alright, let's read some replies. Intrepid Year 3765 said, "My home number was a daycare's old number. Guess how many kids hadn't been dropped off that morning before they were willing to change it. Father-in-law punched me below the belt, so I bricked his switch." So, to start off, I actually have a great relationship with my father-in-law. We have a lot of the same hobbies, actively hang out, and he knows I was the one to do this to him, and he found it hilarious. The situation happened back in December of 2021. Me being with my wife's family for the holidays, and quickly, them all getting drunk. Since I'm usually the DD, I didn't drink since I was gonna have to drive out of the middle of Philly. But as the night went on, I was playfully joking around with my wife and her sister, arguing something stupid like the best thing to do in a game, and honestly just rage baiting my wife like a good husband. Her father, completely drunk, came over and laughed as I rage baited her and told her, quote, "Here's how you deal with your husband," and punched me in the dick. Obviously, he didn't punch me full force, but I'm sure most guys here know even a light hit can be enough to make you keel over. As the night went on, he even apologized and offered me to punch him back, but I said no, but I was obviously gonna get him back. A month later, Pokemon Legends Arceus came out, and me and her entire family got it. Father-in-law also getting it and loving the game. But I beat the game much faster than all of them, and having hunted shiny Pokemon for years, carried some of them over, my favorite being a shiny Giratina I had. Amazingly, before it became public knowledge, as far as I knew, I figured out that if specifically a shiny Giratina used Shadow Sneak, it would just crash your whole Switch and force you to have to fully shut it down and restart the device. Cue petty revenge. A little while later, we're all hanging out at sister-in-law's house, playing Pokemon, and I nonchalantly offered all of them various shiny Pokemon I'd hunted through the years, claiming I had a lot. I didn't, but didn't want him being too suspicious, and knowing her tastes, I knew immediately she would love to have a shiny Giratina. So I traded it to him and just waited. Waited long enough that I kinda just forgot. Then, months later, when we're all hanging out, he was complaining that his Switch kept crashing. He had to restart it. Uninstalled and reinstalled all of his games, but it just kept crashing when he was playing Arceus, and no matter what he did, it wouldn't work. So I asked him, "Oh, is it whenever you use Shadow Sneak with that Giratina I gave you?" He went silent, and then I immediately followed up with, "That's for punching me in the dick in December." He couldn't stop laughing. As he said in his own words, "Oh my god, I wasted real time on that. I respect the long con." It was even funnier when a few days later, articles started popping up for him about that glitch in Arceus well after he found out from me. Everyone in the family agreed it was pretty effing funny. Alright, let's read some replies. Internet is boring said, "I don't know why I thought bricked his Switch was some new slang for some type of specific violence. Manager cut my hours? I'll leave you with one less employee." TLDR, my manager started cutting my hours without notice, so I found a much better job in a week and a half, and sold more memberships than I ever had before in my last week. She was pissed. This isn't a very revengeful story, but to me, I'm proud of myself. I worked front desk in a small business for a sales job selling memberships to clients. I'd consistently been one of the top sales girls there for a full year. We had only 4 other girls who worked the desk with me. It's important to note that in a month, they had started to implement very strict rules they never had when I started. I had specifically told my manager I'd be taking time off school to work that job 30 plus hours a week. All was great the first month as I took time off school and I was making the money I needed. Sales were rough for everyone that month and only one person got above 15% conversion. But every salesperson knows that sometimes that just happens and not to take it too personally. I noticed at the start of last month that my hours had been completely cut to only 15 hours a week with no communication as to why. 15 hours a week getting paid less than what's minimum wage in most states was, as you can imagine, a scare, and I immediately reached out to my manager to see if there were any extra shifts I could take. Keep in mind, in the past year, no one else wanted to work Sundays. I was the only person who worked Sundays for an entire year. My manager reached out to me and told me they were implementing this new policy where if you got under under 15% conversion rate in a month, you were now on probation. You would lose priority shifts and were at risk of losing your position after 2 months. Which, it's important to note, they were not in any position to fire any employees, as we barely could cover one person a shift as it was. This was no doubt to scare the front desk into doing better because the businesses hadn't been doing well, and instead of finding a way to be more successful at getting people to sign up, they were going to punish front desk for always doing what they had asked of us all along. They had it in their head that every single person that walked in that door could afford a $100 a month membership. They also were very strict about some super shady ways to get people to sign up, like encouraging us to straight up lie to the customer that we had family in the area they were from to create a personal connection. We were also forced to argue back with them at least 3+ times if they said no. My manager was talking about making makeup calls and nails required for us. We were required to take pictures on our work iPads of our phones in the back and sign a thing every shift saying we had never touched it. But I never saw my manager's friends turn in their phones once. There were so many other little things that started making this job so toxic. I had a meeting with my manager and she told me there was absolutely nothing she could do about adding me to new hours. I asked if we could do prioritized shifts based on our overall average and not our month-to-month one because my average the month before was the highest in the group. She lied to me and said she didn't have access to those numbers, but I know that's not true because I had found long ago a way to see that on my employee portal. I started crying when she told me to just focus on the clients because in a year of being there, I felt like I was always focused on clients, doing most of the chore and task list while my manager and coworkers showed each other TikToks. And I always sold the most gift cards with no recognition. I was just so incredibly done. My manager promised she'd give me the hours back in October, but it was an empty promise. She told me not to get too stressed about selling memberships with this, which is hilarious because you're telling me my job is on the line based on if I get anyone of any age or background to sign up for a $100 membership. Of course I'm going to be stressed. I let my anger fuel me into diving into getting a position somewhere else. I applied for maybe 75 positions because I just wanted out of there as soon as possible. One of my friends saw this and got me an interview with a position that paid a ton more, could have me full-time, and had an amazing boss and customer service team. I had an interview with them within a week of my meeting with my manager. I nailed the first interview, got invited back for a second interview where they told me I got the position and told me I could start next week. I signed the offer and immediately drove to my other job to tell my manager I was quitting and my last day would be the next week. Apparently, this made her crazy. Not only did I find something better because of their stupid policy and coincidentally would be giving more hours to my coworkers, I sold more memberships than I ever had that week because I was in such a good mood to be leaving. The look on her face was hilarious. On the days she couldn't get my coworkers to take my Sunday shifts, she would have to. Again, I was the only one to do Sundays for a full year. She told my coworkers she was so mad I didn't tell her I was looking for another job. Why would I when you're treating me like this? Anyways, I'm starting my new position tomorrow, and I'm so incredibly thrilled to be working with a team that has already done so much to make me feel valued than that job ever did. Sorry if this is so long. It was more of a rant for me than anything else, but I'm very proud of myself for working so hard to get out of that situation instead of just accepting the shittiness. Now for the replies. Rocket Science posted, "Be sure to tell every other worker that you got a big raise and they should find other jobs." Opie replied to this, "Oh, best believe I was telling everyone." Parked like an entitled jerk, so I ruined his yoga session. My city has charge ports for electric cars in public lots. I can't install a charger for my car at my apartment building, so I rely on these public chargers for a hybrid car. When the program started, the parking spots had signs that read, "Electric vehicles only," because if a gas-powered car takes the spot, the charger can't be used as the cords don't go any further. Most cars blocking the spots could be reported to the police for towing, but certain entitled drivers of electric cars decide that these are their own personal parking spots. They wouldn't actually plug in to charge. They didn't need the free electricity. They just think their car being electric is giving them the equivalent of a handicap play card for a nicer spot. There's no towing them since they obey the sign. Their car is electric, and it's always a Tesla. One morning, I was driving up to a set of the charge ports because my app said one was free. While waiting at the nearby red light, I could see the spot was just taken and the driver was walking away. He wasn't charging his Tesla, and I wouldn't be able to charge. I had no actual recourse to get the guy a ticket or towed like I could with a gas-powered car, so I waited about 20 minutes. Then I called the yoga studio he had walked into, right around the point when I figured his session had safely been going for a little while. I said to the woman picking up, "A person in your class drives a black Tesla. Plates, blah blah blah. There's a tow truck about to hitch up the car for blocking a charging spot. You should really let them know immediately." She was immediately grateful, like I'd just done this jerk a huge favor. Shortly after, he came barreling out of the studio and around the corner to save his car. It was obviously fine. I took pride knowing I'd not only thrown off his yoga session, but that he was also responsible for interrupting the class for everyone else, and that they would all silently judge him. I mean, who wants the license plate of a bad driver read out during yoga? Sometimes when I need a pick-me-up, I like thinking about how he went back to do yoga, fuming that someone was screwing with him. Since then, the city realized these drivers ruin things for everyone and replaced all the signs to say electric vehicles only while charging. It's not the same joy as ruining yoga, but now I can just call the cops and get them ticketed for my petty revenge, which I do every single time, entitled brats. Alright, let's read some replies. Professional Cry7948 replied, "The city I work for is taking things a step further. Knowing that both employees and members of the public like to park and change and then don't come back once their battery is full, we're piloting making these spaces time-bound, 4 or 6 hours max, and then the person stays getting charged extra parking fees for keeping their electric or hybrid car in the space for longer than that. And those extra charges are also time-bound. It's not my program, so I don't know all the details, but the amount they get charged extra increases over time with 3 tiers of fee levels, I think. I expect we'll get some angry comments from entitled electric drivers who have come to see these spaces as theirs. Neighbor pushed me too far. First time posting, sorry for any format issues. I moved into a 5-acre property back in 2022. It's within city limits, so we have to abide by some of the city laws. Between April of 2022 and the present, my neighbor has called city bylaw, city police, as well as the land use bylaw on me over 20 times. 4 things, such as dogs barking, building a fence, pallet fence, / not permanent, an 8x14 deck built in the yard, long grass, bringing my work truck home, etc. In November last year, the bylaw officers told me to file a harassment claim with the police regarding this. They came and the neighbor agreed to stop with the phone calls and was given my phone number to negate the constant response from various city departments, and so I could rectify any issues more quickly. Well, 3 months ago, the calls started once again. RV trailer parking, long grass, and a noise complaint that was called in when everyone who lives at my house was on vacation and no animals were at the house. After 3 years of this, I've had enough. Today, I called the city in regards to a few issues I have with the state of his property. I started by looking up the bylaws regarding vehicle storage. We're not allowed to store any vehicle that's not registered or insured, and a permit is required. This man has upwards of 40 vehicles illegally stored on his property. Next, I saw these shipping containers. 3 of them. Guess what, folks? In my city, you need a building permit to place those on your property. They need to be on a property-built parking pad, including asphalt. And for the icing on the cake, this man rents said vehicles to movie studios for local filming. He has no business license, so this man now has to remove the vehicles and shipping containers before the end of the month, and has to move all RV and utility trailers onto his paved section of driveway or off of the property. Hashtag FAFO. Alright, let's read a reply here. CJYNX replied, "We used to have neighbors exactly like yours, called, emailed, and whined constantly about anything that they could find to complain about. Hearings were scheduled that I was forced to go to, not them. They got to complain all they wanted, but never had to show up in court. The township property inspector had to show up as their face and voice. He inspected our property at least 10 times by driving past the driveway and never found anything wrong with it. The third court case within 3 to 4 hours, the judge said, 'Why are you here before me so often?' 'Because, Judge, my neighbors suck and everyone listens to them blindly without showing up to see that whatever they're complaining about doesn't even exist. They want a homeowners association in a neighborhood that doesn't have one, and they want to be the ones that gets everyone in trouble for not having their property in perfect condition every single minute of the day. The judge said the county district attorney is in our office. He was a county judge in a satellite office each Friday. I'm giving you her number, and I want you to get an appointment with her to press charges for harassment against your neighbors, and I'll be happy to hear the case to make sure they finally leave you alone. I never knew for sure, but I think the township property inspector was friends with the neighbors. Once the judge said that, I never got another letter or had to appear in court again. I'm pretty sure he passed it on and it scared them off. We moved to a new neighborhood and never see our neighbors. We're in the middle of an acre. Hopefully, your situation is fixed by fighting back too. Worked out even nicer than I thought. I live 100 meters from a school, and usually I'm totally fine with that. No problems whatsoever. What drives me up the wall is when school's out, grandparents sometimes park in front of my driveway. So I come home from work and there's someone parked, still sitting in the car, in front of the driveway. Now I'm tired, had a bad day, and kinda done with this BS. So I signal the guy to please move. He gives me the standard, "It's just 5 minutes to pick up the kids" routine, so I cut off my engine, blocking the entire street. People start honking until the traffic cop, who regulates the traffic and the start and end of school, comes over. He asks why I'm stopped and I answer, "Oh, it's no big deal. This guy's just parked in front of my driveway for 5 minutes to pick up his kids." Cop goes over to the other guy and ends up giving him a ticket. I would have been happy with him just moving, but this turned out way better. Alright, replies. Setsuna00XN replied, "That's what happens when you break the law. I've had this happen, where someone parks in front of or in my space at my apartment complex. One guy just wouldn't get it until I had him towed for illegal parking. Then I sued him because I had to pay for the tow. I'm in Michigan. Judge had him reimburse me for the tow and my attorney and court costs. He FAFO. Don't want me walking on your lawn? Don't leave your garbage can blocking the sidewalk." Here's something small and petty I do on my daily walk around the neighborhood. You're supposed to put your trash on the curb once a week on garbage pickup day. Since everyone in my neighborhood uses different trash can companies, every day of the work week, there are multiple garbage toters by the curb. I had a recent injury to my knee that required walking with a cane. No company specifies that garbage toters can't be in the middle of the sidewalk. It was annoying and really an inconvenience to step into the street and go around them when I was using a cane. I started walking around them and stepping on people's lawns, not destroying landscape, but walking a step or two on their property. People in my neighborhood get very upset when children or anyone else walks on their grass. No one's ever challenged me, but I still feel an ounce of satisfaction by doing this when the sidewalk is completely blocked. Alright, let's read the replies. Nibelhund said, "On my walks, I routinely throw anything on the sidewalk into the yards of the owners. Usually it's limbs and branches homeowners cut. They toss them on the sidewalk, totally blocking it, forcing folks to go into the road. I've had a few people start to say something, and I yelled back, 'Call the cops, I'll wait.' Nobody has yet. I'm a very large guy. I also have a permanently handicapped leg from my service years. I walk like Frankenstein. It's noticeable. You want a Bible verse? Sure thing. My wife has a massive family, and due to her culture, a lot of them are religious. As an atheist, this has never been an issue for me, as they're all very respectful of my beliefs, and I respect theirs. Recently, her nephew and his fiancée had a christening for their baby, meaning the whole church experience, then lunch afterwards. All was good until his mother had the brilliant idea of highlighting your favorite Bible verse for the baby. No problem, not for me, but to each their own. My wife can pick one out for both of us. Nope, she wanted everyone to do it. Game on. I did a quick search for a verse I had heard of, but was sure was fake. Turns out it was legitimate. I simply stated, "No problem, I'll highlight Ezekiel 23:20. Funny enough, after they searched it up, it was acceptable for my wife to choose one for both of us, and I continued eating my dry steak. Alright, let's read the replies here. Sig Monitor replied, "I get a kick out of Judges 3:20-24 for the level of detail. Ehud then approached him while he was sitting alone in the upper room of his palace and said, 'I have a message from God for you.' As the king rose from his seat, Ehud reached with his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly. Even the handle sank in after the blade, and his bowels discharged. Ehud did not pull the sword out, and the fat closed in over it. Then Ehud went to the porch, he shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. After he had gone, the servants came and found the doors of the upper room locked. They said, 'He must be relieving himself in the inner room of the palace.' I had a Bible study teacher who used to say we could pick any verse from the Bible, and he would teach us God's wisdom from the words. I loved pulling that one. Okay, everybody, that's all the time we got for today. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and comment down below, and if you want to check out any of our other videos, click the video on the right. I got nothing else for you. I will see you all next time.